Ladies and gentlemen, the crime stats in South Africa have been released and they are not pretty. And I think for the fourth or fifth year running, everything is going up. Unlike the economy, a 10% increase in murders, a 10% increase in sexual offences, 45% increase in attempted sexual offences. Yes, my friends, under ANC rule, South Africa is going to hell in a handbasket, especially concerning crime, because we know that the ANC itself is a criminal organisation. So what initiative is there for it to solve crime for the ordinary citizens of this country? And so therefore, what we actually need to do to solve crime in South Africa is look at how other countries have done it, notably in this case, El Salvador. For those who might not know, El Salvador is a tiny little country right in Central America. And until very, very recently, El Salvador was the most violent country in the entire world. Their murder rate was 103 people for every 100,000 residents. To put it into context, the South African murder rate is between 50 to 80 people per 100,000. So in effect, El Salvador was twice as dangerous as South Africa. But all of a sudden, it is now at 18 people per 100,000. The murder rate has dropped by close to 80% over the course of 2 years. And we're going to find out why. And it all starts with this guy, Nayib Bukele. He is the president of El Salvador and has been the president since 2019. And President Bukele has done something that has never been done before in El Salvador. He declared a state of emergency against crime, because he realized something that a lot of people don't seem to understand. Crime is perpetuated by criminals. Criminals tend to cluster in gangs. So if you take out gangs forcefully, crime will naturally be dissipated. So therefore, to fight crime in El Salvador, he created a state of emergency that suspends constitutional rights for gangsters. And this has led to the arrest of over 60,000 alleged gang members. So in South Africa, we had a lockdown over, the virus of unknown origin, where you couldn't buy cooked chicken and all the rest of it. So imagine that, but solely to fight crime. So what did the president do with this state of emergency? What are the key things he did to make sure that gangsters and affiliations of gangsters cannot get away with doing crime? And I'm just going to be honest here, I think most of the stuff is sort of illegal and possibly against human rights or something like that. But anyway, these are the facts. Increase the detainment time from 3 days to 15 days. And most importantly, allow the government to snoop on people's communications without any form of warrants. But not only that, the law was also created to increase the prison time for terrorists or gangsters, as the president likes to call them. This time around, they got 40 to 45 years of imprisonment rather than 6 to 9. A huge increase, of course. So they basically blanketed entire suburbs, contained them with checkpoints, and basically didn't let anyone out unless they had a good reason to go out or they could prove that they weren't a member of a gang. And through all of this, the murder rate has declined dramatically. Over 65,000 people have been arrested. And guess what? Even though some people, like international organizations, are saying this is against human rights and this is overreach and this is, the inklings of dictatorship in El Salvador, when you speak to ordinary people within Salvador, they overwhelmingly support the state of emergency to cut crime. During a poll last year in April, close to 91% of the people in El Salvador supported this crackdown. Even the Archbishop of El Salvador said that this is a great thing to happen to El Salvador. And as for the president of El Salvador, how do you think people feel about him within his own country? Well, some say he is one of the most popular world leaders we have ever seen. He has an approval rating of close to 87%. Now, of course, he has been accused of being a dictator, authoritarian, and all the rest of it, notably by America, notably by human rights organizations around the world, notably by the United Nations. But when you look at the crime rate collapse under the state of emergency imposed by this particular president, it is no wonder that he is so popular. And importantly, we have to really understand here, what matters to El Salvador is most important to people who actually live there, not to some foreign NGOs or to America or anything like that. Making El Salvador safe is the most important thing for ordinary people within El Salvador, and that's what the president is doing. But not using El Salvador as an example so that South Africa can impose a state of emergency to combat crime, because with these clowns in charge, of course, that won't happen. But I think it gives some very interesting indications about what caused crime in South Africa in the first place. And the first thing you must understand about crime is that it is caused by criminals. What happens when criminals don't get caught? They do more crime. There's a lot of speculation about what causes crime. People say inequality, people say poverty, people say all sorts of things. For the most part, I think that's all bullshit. For the most part, I think there is just a subsection of the population in any country who are just not redeemable anyway. The only way to control those people is to punish them harshly for stepping out of line and committing crime in the first place. Because if you use the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, I would suspect that in South Africa, close to 80% of crime is perpetuated by 20% of the population. If you can control or take out 20% of the population, crime is naturally going to decrease dramatically. And this shouldn't be difficult. We already know how crime operates in South Africa. We already know Zama-Zamas exist in certain geographical areas. We know that gangs exist on the Cape Flats and in other areas. We know that the construction mafia is around KZN and other areas in the country. All these gangs and criminal organizations and syndicates are very well known. But why are they perpetuating? Why are they getting stronger? The very simple reason is because they're not being punished for being criminal. It really is as simple as that. There are poorer countries in the world that are safer than South Africa. There are more countries with inequality that are much safer than South Africa. All of those things are a large distraction from the punishment of criminals. And that's the only thing that actually works. So we know that the ANC are not going to punish criminals because they are criminals themselves. So what can ordinary people do to make sure that criminals don't target them? If we can't rely on the state, you have to rely on yourself and your own community. So number 1, get a gun. Number 2, become proficient in using a gun. Number 3, find gun-like-minded individuals within your community and create a neighborhood watch or a community police forum. Number 4, if we're really lucky, we'll get back the castle doctrine, which states that you can shoot someone who's on your property without your permission. This is also known as like stand your ground rules in America. And of course, most importantly, you can sort of delegate this to security companies. But you know, when the criminals are seconds away, your police are 2 hours away, and your security company could be much quicker. But at the end of the day, you're always your first responder. And if you can leverage your training proficiency, your actual firearms, and leverage that with other people in your community to have a sort of arsenal and a plan and a strategy to combat crime, you can live very well and very safely in South Africa. And this is not sort of something that comes out of the blue. This is already happening across the country. I mean, let's be honest, we have an NGO that is patrolling the border. So let me know down in the comments down below, do you want state of emergency to combat crime? I don't think that's a very good idea. We have the Constitution and we have the ANC, which are useless at all sorts of things. But if you're able to create your own state of emergency within your own household, community, neighborhood, or town, you have a far greater chance of preventing crime happening to you and those that you love and those around you. So therefore, yeah, you're always your first responder, ladies and gentlemen.